Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I'm actually out west. I was at the hearing this morning in Montana, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. This is a busy time during these legislative sessions, so I'm in a Marriott hotel room, which is my home away from home these days. But I wanted to kick off with a couple of issues just to bring to your attention. First is I hope everyone has seen the notices we put out about the Kratom research projects that are ongoing with at the Johns Hopkins University with Dr. Kirsten Smith. She does fabulous work in researching kratom, and I cannot overestimate the value that this kind of kratom research has in the evaluation of public policymakers on how they're going to decide how kratom should be regulated. And so some of these research projects deal with extract products of which there is not sufficient information that right now that will help us because of the attacks that are coming on kratom consumers that use extract products. And there is a pure leaf powder research project. So if all of you, and I encourage you to do it, please go to protectkratom.org/research and look at these projects. They involve some of the people having to come to Johns Hopkins University. You get compensated for it, and you get to participate in extremely valuable research that will really serve to inform public policymakers, both at the federal and state level and at the local level, as they deal with these kratom issues. And goodness knows that we've got all of these opponents that are out there loading up against us that are having their voices heard. We need to have your voice heard through research projects that are validated and that really do make a difference in our examination of how kratom should be treated from a public policy perspective. So again, it's protectkratom.org/research, and you can see the flyers. We're going to continue to circulate this information, and I strongly encourage you to participate. There are some conditions and qualifiers that you have to meet in order to actually participate, but it is critically important that we get a sufficient number of people participating in these research projects in order for them to be valid. So please take advantage of this opportunity. Second, I wanted to highlight the absolutely fabulous job that Madeline Sklar made on the NBC National News Report. I can tell you that 2 years ago, if NBC News, and they did, by the way, were to do a report on kratom, it would have been 100% negative. It would have been attacking the kratom community. And Madeline stood up and spoke for the millions of kratom consumers in America and gave a different perspective and an important perspective on the value that kratom actually provides to people as they deal with a variety of health and wellness issues. And Madeline was outstanding, superb. I was cheering as I watched it because it was a significant breakthrough in national media where they didn't just attack the kratom user community. They decided that they would at least make it balanced. Now, there's no question that the information that was provided, the sensationalized information that was provided in that report, continues in the vein of those people that are simply anti-kratom. But to have the opportunity for this voice, in Madeline's voice, being heard in a way that allowed for viewers to have a balanced perspective about kratom was critically important. We can make the argument that those that claim that kratom is responsible for a fatality in their family, we can look at, examine, and we can pull apart all of the factors that played into that fatality. And we do that on a regular basis. But that is a defensive posture. The ability to have this message that Madeline so eloquently provided it was, like I said, I was cheering. So thank you to Madeline, and all of us are in her debt for agreeing to go on national TV. That is not an easy thing to do. And she was absolutely superb in doing that. So thank you to her. and those who supported her in making sure that that message was heard loud and clear by the American public on a national news platform the way that it was presented. So that was absolutely fabulous work. I want to report to you another good news story, which is what happened at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs. The UN Commission is an international organization of which there are 140 plus countries that are signatories to a treaty. And one of the responsibilities they have at the UN Commission on Narcotic Drugs is to evaluate the actual existence and emergence of substances that need to be evaluated for scheduling. And all of us know that in 2021, the FDA made their backdoor attempt to get an international scheduling in place on Kratom because they know that the UN Commission criteria for scheduling is far lower than what is required under the United States Controlled Substances Act. And so they were trying to go around the fact that they could not prove under the 8-factor analysis required by the Controlled Substances Act here in the United States. They wanted to go around it and get to a international scheduling, which would have compelled the United States then to commence scheduling procedures under the treaty obligations that we would have. Thankfully, an independent evaluation by the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence, as was released in their decision on December 1st of 2021, concluded that there was insufficient evidence even to conduct a critical review, which would have given scientists around the world 12 months to evaluate the recommendation. The evidence was so incomplete and insufficient that the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence took the lowest level of surveillance, and that's what Kratom is now on their surveillance list. We learned earlier this year that there was an attempt by the FDA to take another run at Kratom for international scheduling. And so we organized a delegation to go to the UN Commission. And the American Kratom Association has always maintained that we want to have public policy, and in this case, international policy, dictated by the scientists and the science that they develop. And so on this occasion, we had Dr. Chris McCurdy from the University of Florida. We had Dr. Kirsten Smith from Johns Hopkins University. We had Dr. Ed Boyer from Ohio State University and a visiting professor from Harvard. He's an emergency room physician. We had Dr. Marilyn Eustace, who is a renowned scientist, formerly with NIDA, now with Thomas Jefferson University. And we had Dr. Darshan Singh from the University of Malaysia, and Dr. Jack Henningfield from Johns Hopkins. And those 6 scientists presented what's called a side event at the UN Commission. And the interesting outcome of that was the responses from some of the leaders within the UN Commission who are responsible for the evaluations of what substances are referred to the Expert Committee on Drug Dependence. And their conclusion was that the FDA is once again over their skis, they're wrong, and that there was no need for there to be even a referral to the expert committee, given the short period of time that's elapsed since the last evaluation and what appeared to be very suspect evidence that the FDA had provided. And so that was a great win for us. We have a transcript of that particular event that will be produced in the next couple of days. We got the preliminary one, and some of the transcription people don't understand some of the nuanced scientific terms and don't get them right. So they're cleaning that up right now by meticulously going through and listening again to the videos to make sure that they get it accurate. And when that happens, we will, of course, distribute it. We've already distributed and cut up the presentations by these scientists so that you have them available to circulate to local officials in your area. And we will continue to push out that information to help you in educating people about the safety profile of Kratom as is documented in this scientific platform. So that's something that we'll continue to work on and disseminate to you so that all of you have it. Then I wanted to go over some of the hotspot states that we're working in. This is a busy time because these legislative sessions, some states go just a couple of months, some states go halfway through the year, and some are there year round. Some states meet once a year, every 2 years, for a limited period of time. And so that kind of thing happens. But a perfect example of that was in Montana. 2 years ago, the Montana, and they meet every other year, the Montana legislature promoted a ban on kratom. It was entered on the last week of the session. So on a Thursday evening, it was inserted into the controlled substances list. And everybody in the Senate side expected that would just roll on through. When we discovered that that was done, we rallied the advocates and we hired some lobbyists, and we were able on the following Monday, just a couple of days later, to have a vote of 100-0 in the Montana House to stop that ban bill. Now, here we are in the following legislative session, and we have promoted the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. I can tell you it was very disappointing to sit in that hearing and hear opposition testimony from people that we would have thought would have been supportive of what we're trying to do. And and I'm talking about the representative from the Global Kratom Coalition who testified about in opposition to a provision in the bill that was stripped out of the bill over a month ago. And I watched the legislators listen to his online testimony, searching for the bill to see what provision he was objecting to, which is not in the bill. And to me, it just created more confusion, and it gave the impression that the kratom community is not unified in wanting to have a good regulatory scheme put in for kratom. So it's an awful situation, is unforced error, and again, becomes this constant nuisance about not being aligned in areas where we absolutely should be. We continue at the American Kratom Association to fight for consumer access for any product that meets the specifications for market entry, which means the manufacturer has to have a reasonable basis for safety under the conditions of use, which means labeling for their product. And we all know about the variety of products that are on the marketplace today, but the backdoor attacks on products that another organization doesn't like and they want to restrict it is all because they're trying to restrict the marketplace for a certain class of products. We think consumers ought to have information that allows them to make intelligent decisions about the products that they consume for their health and well-being. So this continues to be a problem. It is an unfortunate, within this kratom community, unforced error that repeatedly is being done. And I've seen it in this legislative session repeatedly. And I think the kratom community needs to rise up and push back against those kinds of anti-competitive provisions that are being promoted by others within the community, because it doesn't speak for the majority of the kratom consumers in this community. I can tell you that generally speaking, and it happened in Montana, one of the issues that we consistently confront is that the agency that is designated in the legislation obviously wants to come in, and because they don't know much about kratom and because they fear that they would be held accountable by the legislature for not doing exactly what they're instructed to do within the legislative language, they always drive a fiscal note, which means the cost of the bill in order to implement. And it is important to recognize that in the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, that we have a regulatory scheme that does not put an inordinate burden on the agency that is going to enforce the bill. And it is important that there is a distinction between a drug enforcement policy or regimen and a dietary supplement and botanical supplement regimen. At the federal level, Dr. Califf, the former commissioner of the FDA, I think it was in September or August, testified before the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee when asked the question, what is the effort that you're undertaking in order to protect the dietary supplement consumer in America? And Dr. Califf said, we are not an enforcement agency that goes out and has an army of investigators that goes to every dietary supplement store in America to check compliance with these products. We are a referee. When a violation is observed, and that comes in a variety of ways, then we go check it out and we determine whether or not the product is in violation of the standards. That is the same regulatory model that should be in effect in the States. We're not asking for a Gestapo inspection force to go out. That is inordinately expensive and is unnecessary in this space. And yet there are others in the Kratom community that are advocating for excessively detailed responsibilities by these agencies, and they respond with huge fiscal notes. And to give you some perspective on this, the state of Utah, first state to enact the Kratom Consumer Protection Act in 2019. So they've had almost 6 years of experience in dealing with this. And they, for the first 5 years of that 6 year experience, were able to regulate the kratom industry at a cost of about $172,000 with one FTE, which means one full-time equivalent, one person that was doing it. That person managed the applications for registering kratom products, determined whether they complied with the regulation and rule that was reflected in the statute, and then let them go onto the market. When they found products that were non-compliant, and again, they're not sending Gestapo forces out to do it, when they had a complaint filed, they would react to it. The Utah Department of Agriculture has done random tests. They do good things that are typical of a responsible methodology in a regulatory regimen. They are not out there to do what these other states are now being encouraged to do by others in the kratom community that require these huge fiscal notes. In the state of North Dakota, there is a fiscal note of $1.7 million when Utah can do it for 172. And now this year, because they've had an increase in the number of registrations by processors, they're now up to 55 companies that are manufacturing kratom products and over 600 products. They're adding a second FTE. That's fine. It will increase the cost to $250,000. Now, how in the world can a state with 3+ million people do it for $250,000 when the state of North Dakota has a third of that population is asking for 1.7 million? There are two factors involved in this fiscal note problem. One is a misunderstanding of what the role that agency is being asked to assume. And secondly, specific regulatory provisions in the statutes that are unnecessary, anti-competitive, and protecting only one product in the marketplace over others. And that, of course, drives a stronger, more robust regulatory scheme that drives up the cost of regulating it. It is setting us back significantly as we fight in these states to try to get a smoothed out process, which is embodied in the Kratom Consumer Protection Act that is now passed in 14 states. We can, at the American Kratom Association, can look at that experience and the success we've had, and the other organizations can look at the number of bills that they've defeated because they act inappropriately in these kinds of situations. So we're working hard now to fight, against these unforced errors within the community. And we hope that you understand that as this happens, that we are fighting for the consumers, not for companies. And certainly we want any company that meets the standards to be able to have free access to the marketplace under the proper labeling and the packaging and all of the things that are required for quality products to be on the marketplace. What we are not going to support are these provisions that come in that are designed to deliberately restrict the marketplace, inhibit the ability to come into the marketplace by competitive products or to remain in the marketplace. So that's a fight we're going to continue to have. And we ask that hopefully you'll see the light with us and continue to support those efforts. The states that are critically important to us now that I put on our hot list for discussion tonight, Mississippi. Some very encouraging things have happened. All the ban bills have failed. Now they're haggling about the excise tax, how much that will cost. That's the way they want to fund the enforcement activities there in Mississippi. And they're fighting back and forth in some conference committees. We're hopeful that we'll see real established progress in Mississippi in what's been a 5-year battle or war in order to get a KCPA passed there. In the state of Florida, unfortunately, there was a hearing held this morning, which is the first step in a very long process in Florida, where Senator Collins, the sponsor of what he calls the Kratom Consumer Protection Act, it is not. It is a bill that is ridiculously anti-competitive. It puts restrictions that are awful. And I get it, they were advocated by other groups within the kratom community, but just as an example, they're arguing for a product limitation serving size of 40 milligrams of kratom products. That is not based in any safety data for consumers, and it contradicts the experience that is available to researchers and to the public about safely consumed kratom products. And just at a gross level, I can tell you as an example, the FDA in their single ascending dose study looked at the consumption of kratom to determine when they could trigger a serious adverse event. They got to 8 grams without anything before they started to see the onset of nausea with some people, and got to 12 grams where they didn't see any serious events. And they finally suspended the study and concluded that kratom is well tolerated at all dose levels. But for those that experience the nausea, we're talking now at 12 grams, which is 12,000 milligrams, and roughly about 20% of the of those milligrams is mid content, and that would equate to somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,400 milligrams of a product that was taken in a 5-minute period, which induced only nausea. Certainly 20 milligrams. You see the delta between those two things. It is mind-boggling how anyone could come to the conclusion that a 40 milligram, I may have said 20 milligrams, it was 40 milligrams, which is in the Florida bill. It is not based on any scientific evidence, but that's what we're up against. I submitted to the sponsors 20-some amendments to their bill because it is so anti-competitive. It is so restrictive, and from a regulatory standpoint, it drives a fiscal note that is in the millions of dollars. And it's going to be supplemented with a higher fiscal note as a result of what happened here with the filing of this bill. So we are in battle mode on that issue, and we're going to continue to fight. So Florida is a mess right now, and we're going to continue to have to work hard. And we will need advocates there to help us, and of course the vendor community as well. In North Dakota, we have a similar problem with the fiscal note. We're working hard on resolving that, but literally it stopped us in our tracks. And again, some counterproductive kind of activity by other kratom groups that are getting in the way of this. I've described what happened in Montana. In Texas, there is a ban bill, and I just before the call started learned that that ban bill is going to be heard on Thursday morning this week. They've given us zero notice of any substance to be able to get people there. We're scrambling now to find experts that can attend in Texas at that hearing and speak against the ban bill that is being proposed there. So we're going to continue to inform. We'll let you know what needs to be done. This is again a Senate hearing. It's the first step in a long process, but we're going to hopefully get experts there, and then after we see what the committee does, we'll trigger our advocacy effort there in Texas. So keep your powder dry until we get there. Nebraska. Nebraska went great. It's a unicameral legislature, meaning one legislative body. Our bill passed unanimously in that unicameral legislature. It got to the second stage. There are 3 votes that they take on every bill. The second stage, they loaded on a couple of amendments, several amendments, onto the unanimously approved KCPA because and it's a procedure they use where they try to get bills that they know aren't going to be favored to slide through on a Christmas tree on a piece of legislation that is going to make it through. So we've had to fight off some of those amendments. Some of them we inevitably are going to have to accept because they're not going to result in a defeat of the legislation. But we're trying to parse through those things. And when that clears that hurdle, we have one final vote. And then hopefully we'll be clear with Nebraska being the 15th state going with a KCPA. Hopefully that'll be done in a relatively short period of time. Other states, and there are multitudes of these states, and every one of the states I'm about to name has its own set of issues that are complex. We're going to have to work through them on a state-by-state basis, inform advocates what they can and should do at the appropriate times as we go forward. California, we have a KCPA bill. This is one that last year had an enormous fiscal note because of the absurdly complex regulatory scheme that was advocated for by the Global Kratom Coalition. Thankfully, they've started to scale back on that kind of regulatory scheme, and hopefully we'll get to a much better place there. But a sponsor has filed the bill, and that process has started. But we're fighting through, and I'm going to, before we leave, talk about our new enemy, which is the 7-hydroxymitragynine crowd and the Heart Foundation and what's called 7 Hope that are now encouraging and getting lobbyists in multiple states in order to try to get legislative provisions that will protect their ability to come on the marketplace when it is not justified. And I'll describe that here in a minute. State of Washington, we're proceeding with the early stages of the filing of that bill, and we'll keep you posted. Colorado, we're having a fight on the fiscal note. We're working to scale it back. Unfortunately, in Colorado, they have a very dire fiscal budget situation, and there's some very complex constitutional provisions about how much money can be raised in order to fund an enforcement effort. We think that the regulatory scheme that we're fighting is similar in other states, is way too complex. It is too intense, and it's driving a fiscal note that's too high. And because of the budget situation in Colorado, it's likely going to have to be scaled down significantly. We want it to be more in line with what's happening in Utah, obviously. In the state of Kansas, we're optimistic that we're getting better educated legislators to look at it. This might be a multi-year project there, but we're at least working on it. State of Missouri, we passed the first committee. This, as everyone knows, is a state that the KCPA passed, and then the governor vetoed it on the premise that the FDA told the governor personally that kratom was illegal to be sold in the United States at the federal level. That was not true, and yet he believed it and therefore vetoed it. That governor is gone. And so we now have, I think, a pathway to Missouri becoming another state to pass the KCPA. In Iowa, we ran into similar problems with, these competing groups coming in, complicating things, but we're back on track. Hopefully, it's something we can get done in this session or maybe next year. They have a 2-year session, so bills carry over. So we're watching that one closely. In Michigan, we have a huge problem with the enforcement agency being willing to take on kratom regulation, and we're in hopefully the last stages of the negotiation to resolve that issue. In the state of Illinois, we have multiple bills, and again, self-inflicted wounds in not being aligned with all of us working together for the same objective. I am hoping that we finally come to some language that will allow us to move forward in Illinois and get the KCPA passed through there. In the state of Tennessee, there is a resolution that calls for either the ban or a regulatory scheme on kratom. It was driven by a constituent who reported to their legislator about a loved one they lost, attributing it to kratom. But I think that that resolution is not binding, and it's allowed for an education for people. And so next year we'll be able to go in and push hard for regulations on kratom as opposed to a ban. So I think that was good news. In Ohio, we're fighting the Department of Agriculture there, huge fiscal note, but we finally have the legislative package done, and we're negotiating intensely with the regulatory agency. And within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a clear path as to how things are going to happen there. In the states of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and in South Carolina, we're working to try to get committees educated and pushing for the KCPA legislation. The state of Rhode Island looks like they're going to have hearings on the repeal of the existing ban and moving forward with the KCPA. And that will happen in the second week in April, we believe. And we have negotiated language with the governor's office that they say they'll accept. In Arkansas, we're doing the same thing. That hearing will be held next week in Arkansas, and we're hopeful that that'll push along. I'm still worried about the governor's reaction because of the very strong opposition by the Department of Health there that instituted the ban initially back in 2015, I believe it was. So we've got some work to do there. And we're waiting to see what bills are filed in the state of Louisiana, because that's obviously one that there's a significant amount of activity that's going on in the local parishes and the police juries. So that's something we're fighting on hard there. So that's the states we're working on. I might have missed a state or two. I don't know. I apologize if I did, but we can follow up on any of those that maybe I didn't cover. 7-hydroxymitragynine. The federal law requires that any substance in the dietary or botanical supplement category under the DSHEA Act has to have a reasonable basis for safety prior to market entry under the conditions of use. It was represented to the American Kratom Association by the Hart Group, which is one of the leading 7-OH manufacturers, that they had met that criteria. We accepted at face value what they said and their certifications that they had done so. We invited them to come to a public meeting with their scientists to make the presentation, at which time they disclosed they really didn't have any scientific data, but in fact were relying upon consumer experience data where there had not been any reported serious adverse events associated with 7-hydroxymitragynine. There are a number of reasons why that's not a justified conclusion, largely because of the inability to identify 7-hydroxymitragynine precise role in any adverse event. And just to give you an example, until 3 weeks ago, if you were sitting at home and had observed a concern about the consumption of a Kratom product by a family member and called the Poison Control Center, it would not have mattered what Kratom product you were ingesting or a 7-hydroxymitragynine product, because it was coded by the person at the other end of the phone line as a Kratom adverse event. 3 weeks ago, the Poison Control Center added 7-hydroxymitragynine as a substance, which they should do. The FDA has not done so with the FDA adverse events reporting system, so we're hopeful that they'll also recognize it. But the bottom line that there are attributed adverse events to Kratom, they are in fact masked by numerous factors and we see this in the death reports about how it's not an adequate conclusion, scientifically based and evidence-based, to claim that Kratom is in fact the sole cause of or a contributing factor in any adverse event, because of the inability to test for products like 7-hydroxymitragynine. And we all know that 7-hydroxymitragynine is not a natural constituent of the Kratom plant. It is in fact a metabolite that occurs after the harvesting of the plant, and it starts to degrade, and you see the presence of 7-hydroxymitragynine. And at those levels in the heating process, 7-OH never gets above never exceeds the 2% level of the total fraction of the alkaloids. It probably is less than that, but it never gets above 2%. And any product that contains more than 2% of the overall fraction of the alkaloids in that product is a synthesized product. Now, the Heart Group and the 7 Hope Group are trying to confuse the issue by saying, oh, no, there are the 2% levels is not justified. The synthesization is semi-synthesis. They go through a convoluted process to try to justify the presence of these products in the marketplace. They are wrong, because by their own description of their own scientists, they do not have the science currently, nor did they have the science other than this flimsy market experience data prior to market entry. And that's not what the purpose of the law that the Congress passed was designed to do, to protect consumers. That's flimsy, it's shoddy, it should not be accepted as the way to do it. And so the AK withdrew its agreement with Hart. Now, the principal argument is one that we still agree with Hart on, is that these 7-hydroxymitragynine products should not be labeled or marketed as Kratom products. And the leaders in the Hart Group have violated that provision as well. So that's very disappointing. No one in this marketplace should think that a 7-hydroxymitragynine product should be either labeled as a Kratom product, nor should it be associated by any consumer as being a safe Kratom product, because the science is not there. Some of the justifications in the testimony this morning in the Montana legislature by the Hart Group was that in 2018, the rejection of the recommendation for scheduling by the Department of Health and Human Services in the form of Dr. Joie evaluated 7-hydroxymitragynine as one of these issues. So it's not true that the 7-hydroxymitragynine was considered in 2018 as part of this complex 7-OH product alignment, because those products weren't even on the marketplace until 2023. And certainly the only reference by the Dr. Joie to 7-hydroxymitragynine was its naturally occurring levels as a metabolite in the drying process. And that's what he said the FDA had not proven presented any danger to the American people. The conclusion had nothing to do with 7-hydroxymitragynine in a synthetically enhanced formulation, which poses significant issues that need to be resolved prior to market entry. And that cat's out of the bag. Horses left the barn, whatever analogy you want to use, because they're on the marketplace and they simply have to be restricted at this point. So I'm going to stop there and go to some of the questions, but I just want to encourage everyone that we need to revitalize our interest in these particular states where we're seeing these activities. And I just got a note from our Texas lobbyist where that they want to activate our advocates who support Kratom in the morning with the committee members. And so we're going to work when we get off this call to start that process to let our advocates say no and oppose the banning of Kratom in Texas, because obviously it's a huge problem if that were to happen. There has not been uh, a ban, a state ban on Kratom since Rhode Island did it at the behest of the FDA, along with the other 5 other states, where the FDA said and promised that they would have a federal ban in effect, and that they were just advising the states to get ahead of the curve. So they were wrong on that. So there's that. And I'll conclude with, I should have mentioned this earlier, our federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act will be refiled here in the next couple of weeks. And we're planning on doing some advocacy related activities, which we'll share with you so that you can help us with this. The KCPA will be modified a little, but it will retain the elements that the FDA can no longer use the ruse that they have under the DSHEA Act, saying that Kratom is somehow not an approved dietary ingredient because it has not been approved under the process that is in the bill for Kratom to submit the evidence and data that justifies its safety. So that's called a new dietary ingredient notification. The FDA has routinely turned them all down based on their bias, not the evaluation of the evidence and data, and their bias against Kratom. So it will eliminate that. Also requires for the publication of safety data on the FDA website so they don't get to misinform the public. And it will restrict the import alert only to those identified importers that have contaminated products. And the burden is on the FDA in order to document that. And then, of course, it has a procedure that allows for those vendors to get back into compliance. Excuse me. So stand by for the release of that new language, and we'll certainly keep everyone apprised. Excuse me. So let's go to some of the questions that are up. In Illinois, Michael says that Representative Howder is now a co-sponsor to an existing Illinois KCPA along with 2 others. However, it's not the Marcus Evans bill. There are 2 bills out there, and we're hopeful that in the next week that we're going to merge those 2 bills together. We're close to it. I hope that we can do this because certainly the fiscal note on the other bill, the Tarver bill, which is promoted by the GKC, is simply too high, and we need to reconcile this. So hopefully we'll get Illinois in line, because obviously we see all of these local bans that are going on there, and they're just going to spread. Adam asked about the import alert. I think I've answered that. Kenneth asked, hey, I know it's too early to be concrete. I was wondering if you had any idea which way the health department under Kennedy is leaning on Kratom. We're working hard through a variety of resources and contacts in the Trump administration to inform everyone about Kratom and what the proper regulatory scheme should be. Some great news is that there's a couple of special government employees back at the White House or at HHS. Dr. Joie is back at HHS working, and that means that they're there for a temporary basis. Jim Carroll is working in the White House on a temporary basis. And so we're working hard to help inform them, and we're making real progress. This is a big job, but it's a slow moving job right now because there's so many priorities that the White House has, and this is not the hottest issue that they have going on right now. So, we're going to see how that goes. I think I've answered Tennessee, and that's of course a resolution, and we'll see if there's a hearing on. And Jennifer mentions HB 147. I'm going to have to look into that in Tennessee. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that. I've answered the federal KCPA from Misty. Chelsea says, should we show up at the hearing in Arkansas next week? Yes, anyone who is in the area that wants to come and wants to testify should do so. We encourage it. We'll circulate the information on when the hearing information. So you stand by to get that in the next day or so on how that's done. Heidi asked, what can we do to get the FDA to publish the results of the single ascending dose study? Great question. Their answer is, oh, we're waiting to publish it. They've already made a presentation on it at a symposia, and of course they're working hard on trying to suppress it. They're minimizing it. Remember, this was a significant safety study, and now they're trying to push it off and say, well, it didn't include extracts. Well, that's because they chose not to. They should have. Well, it's really just a precursor to being able to do a human abuse potential study on addiction. Yes, it is, but you cannot ethically proceed with a HAP study if you have not determined the safety of the humans being able to ingest the product. So they're playing games with us, and just along the way. Uh, Misty asks, is Jim Carroll still involved with Heart? Yes. That it just shows you that there can be people of goodwill that have different viewpoints. But the one thing Jim Carroll is resolute on is, in his experience in the White House, is that the FDA is wrong on the policy and the science on kratom. And he's going to sort out how he supports, to the extent that he may or may not support the Heart Group on his own. The Heidi asked, are they required to publish their results in clinical trials? I think they are, but they're using dodging techniques in order to delay that. So we're going to keep pushing on that. So yeah, Jennifer just clarified that it's House Joint Resolution 147 in Tennessee, and again, that's something that we will try to modify it, but it's truly just a statement of principle, and it does call for a ban or the regulation. And I think it's a perfect argument platform for us to make that the ban would only be justified with these unsafe products that are on the marketplace, like 7-hydroxymitragynine, and the poly drug use effects that are enhanced when you use those kinds of products. So these are fantastic questions, by the way. They are things that this whole body of effort that we're putting in right now jointly, the advocates, the AKA, to some extent, even the GKC, they're doing some really good things. The Botanicals for Better Health and Wellness are doing really good things. They're helping in Indiana, where we're hopeful that we can get an overturn of the ban there. That's a little bit of a convoluted process right now, but we're working on it. And I shout out to the Botanicals for Better Health and Wellness, because they're at least open, straightforward, and where we have disagreements, we can have a discussion. It's not my way or the highway, and we've been able to work with them and negotiate with them, and that's been a very pleasant experience. We hope that that will draw in the Global Kratom Coalition people as well as we go forward. So there's a lot of interesting things that are happening going forward. And Misty asked this question: why can't the KCPA go after 7-OH dealers? We are. State of Utah has already done it under the authority granted by the KCPA. We're looking at ways that we can encourage other states to do the same thing, that have passed the KCPA, that have the specific language in it that bars synthetic products. And we think that there's an effort to do that. We're working with law enforcement agencies, attorney generals, and legislatures in those states where it's passed to encourage the enforcement agency to take action against 7-OH products and the distributors and the retailers of those products. We also have I'm going to tip my hand a little, a program that we think advocates can help us with in identifying where those products are being sold, that we can then provide the information and evidence to a law enforcement group or a regulator in those states. So stay tuned for that project too. Lots of great things that are happening. And I know that some of what I've described is a bit of a challenge, and you would think that when the bottom line issue comes down to, do you want in your state to have a regulatory scheme that protects consumers against adulterated, synthesized, and dangerous kratom products, or do you want the Wild West? That should be a simple answer for a legislator. And the only thing that confuses it, the only thing, is these fights that are going on in the kratom community that have no place in this discussion. And that's truly unfortunate and frustrating. But we have to recognize the reality that that's what it is. And we're going to do our best to, in the background, resolve the conflicts. And more importantly, to get to these legislators and say, here's the right public policy, and we recommend it strongly. So we will continue to pursue that and work on it. I, as I say all of the time, and I sincerely mean it, that it's the advocates that drive this. All of the scientific and policy discussions we have, the thing that resonates with these legislators on the ground is hearing from their constituents who have had a positive experience with Kratom. I sat at dinner last night in Montana with the legislator who had just been appointed. His predecessor had resigned, and he said, someone at the table, another legislator said, well, I never heard of Kratom until now. And he said, oh, I know about Kratom. He said, my friend is a fitness guy and he swears by it as part of his fitness routines, both pre-workout and post-workout. He uses Kratom. And to hear that was encouraging. And he went on to expound about how he has used it and his wife has used it and they've had very positive experiences with it. So I think that's because advocates get out there, tell their stories, and make a real difference. And so I appreciate everybody who does that. With that, I'm gonna end. I'm just gonna check to make sure that we had all the questions were answered. I think we did. So I think we're good. Any questions you have about, just recapping the research project, please go to protectkratom.org/research and sign up. We need to have whatever sacrifice it may require to have you come into Johns Hopkins University and participate in this study. It's a short window of time, but we need to have this research because it moves the needle. So please do that as you go forward. And then all of you should take the opportunity to get on the Kratom Gals podcast with Madeline and thank her personally for what she did. I mean, that's hard. As I said earlier, it's hard to do a national TV interview, and she was fantastic. So everyone reach out and thank her for having the courage to do that and for telling our story. That's the most important thing, to have a Kratom advocate that was willing to stand up and describe the experience that she personally had and how Kratom has helped her. That's what makes the difference. So thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. This, of course, has been recorded and it will be shared. But those who took the time here, we appreciate it very much. For those that are detractors that are on, the door is always open for these discussions, and we certainly welcome them and look to have the opportunity to try to find agreement where it's possible and respectfully disagree where it's not. So with that, I'll say thank you and we'll close out. See everyone on the next webinar.